Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys my opinion on the best top laners for solo queue for patch 5.23. So first up, I have Malphite. I think that Malphite is a pretty good pick right now in this meta. We're seeing a lot of AD auto attack based champions being played, Tryndamere and Yasuo especially, and Malphite is a really good counter to them because he can just build full armor, and he also reduces the attack speed whenever he slams the ground with his E, so that just makes him a really good pick against those champions and against like any champion that is auto attack based. He's super tanky as well. Once you get to the mid to late game as Malphite, he's really tanky, and he also does quite a bit of damage for how tanky he is. If you just pick up the Iceborne Gauntlet on Malphite, then he actually does a surprising amount of damage. He is also a really good engaged champion. If you're looking for a top laner who's got really hard engage, then Malphite is definitely going to be the top laner for you, because I find that whenever I'm playing as Malphite, if my team can get ahead in the early game, then I can always just be looking for picks with my ultimate, looking to get an engage and start a team fight. And I find that as long as my team does get ahead, I can end games before like the 30-minute point consistently as Malphite, just because he's got that really strong engage with his ult. He's got pretty good CC as well with his Q and with his ultimate. One con to him though is that he's a little bit weaker if you do fall behind with him, since he's an all-in champion, and if your team falls behind, then you're not going to be able to look for those picks, and you're not going to be able to go for those all-ins like you would if you were ahead. Next up, I have Jax. So Jax is a really good champion right now, pretty much just due to the recent buffs that the Rageblade item got. It just makes Jax a much stronger pick because he synergizes with the item so well. He's a champion who benefits both from the attack damage and the ability power that the item gives, and just having that item on Jax as your first item gives him a really big power spike, and he can duel almost like any other champion in the game once he does pick that item up. He's a really good duelist too, and he's a great pick against a lot of the meta top laners like Yasuo, Tryndamere. He's a good pick against Master Yi because he's got that dodge, and if he's playing against a champion who is auto attack based, then he's going to be able to duel them really well. He's got pretty good mobility too with his Q. He can use that to ward jump to get out of a sticky situation, and he can also just use it to jump on the opponent. He's got mixed damage, which makes it really hard for the enemies to build against him. Once you do hit level 6 as Jax 2, his dueling potential just becomes that much stronger because he gets his ultimate, and his ultimate gives him a lot of good tank stats. It gives him bonus armor and magic resist, so he's just able to duel really well once he does hit level 6. He's also a really good split pushing champion because with Jax, his passive just allows him to take down towers really quickly, and he's also a great duelist too, so those two factors combined just make him a great split pusher. He is also a really good late game champion. Once you get to max build on Jax, he's gonna do a ton of damage while still being pretty tanky at the same time. And one con to him though is that he can get kited pretty easily in team fights. If you don't end up like jumping on your opponent, stunning them, and bursting them down, then it can be you can get kited pretty easily if you are playing against an enemy team who does have strong CC. Next on my list, I have Kayle. So Kayle is the one champion that I've just been spamming lately in solo queue. Over the past day or so, I've played 4 games on Kayle, and I haven't lost a single game with her, and I haven't really done like too well in all of those games either. I think the main reason why Kayle is so strong right now is that once you get the Guinsoo's on Kayle, it just gives her a really good power spike. Once you pick up the Nashers and the Guinsoo, you can pretty much duel like any other top laner in the game. Like, she's a great duelist like Jax too, and once you do get to the mid to late game team fights, then you're going to be able to deal so much damage with Kayle. Her ultimate is a really good ability too. It's pretty game changing. If you have someone on your team like a Tryndamere or a Yasuo, the synergy with Kayle's ultimate and those champions is really good because they're all in champions and they want to get in the enemy's faces, and if you put a Kayle ult on them, they can deal so much damage and they won't be taking any damage in return. She's got the heal with her W2, which just allows her to heal up her teammates, and it also gives her a nice little speed boost as well. Once you do get to the mid to late game, it actually does start healing for quite a bit. She's also a great split pusher just due to the AoE damage that she has with her E, and she can kite really well too. She's a great pick against someone like Tryndamere because if Tryndamere tries to jump on Kayle, she can slow him and then she can just start kiting him around with the range form she's got with her E. And she is also fairly easy to play. She isn't really too hard of a champion. As long as you can use your ultimate in the right situation as Kayle, then you can have really good success with her. And one con to Kayle though is that she is a pretty easy gank target in the early game because she does not have a gap closer. Next up, I have Hecarim. So with the recent changes to the Warlord's Bloodlust, it's not as strong anymore, and therefore I think that champions who benefit from the Fervor of Battle are a lot stronger this patch, and that's why Hecarim is pretty high up on my list. He's a really good champion with that mastery, and his early game pressure and his mid to late game team fighting is really good. You can definitely look to snowball the early game as Hecarim because you can take Ignite on him. And I would also recommend taking Teleport on Hecarim, Ignite, and Teleport. And once you do hit level 6 as him, always be looking down bot lane and tell your bot lane to plant a deep ward in the enemies or in the bush. Because Hecarim's TP ganks are some of the best in the game just due to his ultimate and due to his E. So when you are playing as him, make sure you are taking advantage of his strong teleports. He's got a great mid-game power spike too. Once he does pick up the Trinity Force, he starts to deal a load of damage. And I find that you really only need 1 to 2 damage items on Hecarim. I'll always build the Trinity Force first on him, and then after that, if my team needs a tank, I'll just go full tank. I might end up going something like a Youmuu's Ghostblade after that or a Steric's Gage, but I find that you really only need to go Trinity Force, and then you can go full tank after that and still do quite a bit of damage. He does also have very strong engage with his ultimate, and a few cons to him though is that he's a pretty easy gank target in the early game because he's not going to be taking flash, and he is also a little bit weaker if he does fall behind since he's an all-in champion. And to round out the top 5 for this patch, I have Mundo. So this is really no surprise here. Mundo's got one of the highest win rates for any top laner in the game right now, and that's mainly because of the recent changes to the masteries as well as the recent buff that he got to his E. The buff that he got to his E is really good because it actually makes him a surprisingly good duelist in the early game now. One of the biggest cons to Mundo before was that he could get bullied out of lane pretty easily, and he couldn't really duel a lot of the meta top laners, but his E actually does a lot of damage now, and he can definitely hold his own in the top lane. So some other pros to Mundo are that he's insanely tanky. Once you get to the mid to late game as Mundo, it's just really hard to kill him because he's going to be getting those tank stats, and he's also going to have his ultimate, which is on a pretty short cooldown as well. So once Mundo's got his ultimate running, it's just so hard to kill him. He's got great sticking power too with his Q, and he's, like I said, nearly unkillable late game. A few cons to Mundo though is that he's a pretty easy gank target in the early game, which we are finding is a common con to a lot of these top laners for this patch because most of them don't have a gap closer, and also he's weak against Vayne. I would definitely recommend playing Vayne against Mundo because she does the true damage, which counters him pretty hard. So if you're a good Vayne player and the enemy team does lock Mundo, I would recommend playing her. Also, make sure that somebody on your team takes Ignite when you're playing against Mundo because it will reduce the healing effects of his ultimate, and if nobody takes Ignite, then definitely make sure that you are building Grievous Wounds or that you are building an item that has Grievous Wounds to counter his ultimate. So first up on the honorable mentions for this patch, I have Alawi. If I pronounce that wrong, then just correct me in the comments below, guys, but I think that she's a pretty solid top laner. I haven't played her at all yet, but I've played against her a lot, and seems like a pretty good pick right now. I can't really give you guys a good judgment on how strong she is exactly because I haven't played her myself, but from seeing her, I definitely do think that she's a fairly solid pick. Next up, I have Quinn. So with the recent changes Quinn got to her Q, I think that she's a much stronger pick right now. She's also a pretty decent jungler, but for top lane, she's a good pick against a lot of the melee champions because she's ranged, so she can poke them down in the laning phase, and the roaming potential that you do have with Quinn now, with the changes to her ultimate, are really good. You can definitely look for some nice roams once you do it level 6 as her, and if you do get ahead in the laning phase, say you win your lane, you take the enemy's tower, then you can just look for roams, and that just makes her a really strong pick for solo queue in my opinion. So next up I have Wukong. Wukong actually does have one of the highest win rates in the game for top lane. The reasons why I think he's got a pretty high win rate is because his team fight is really good. Just due to the AoE damage and CC he has with his ultimate, his early game isn't all that bad either. So if you're just looking for a solid team fight top laner, I would definitely recommend trying out Wukong. Next I have Yasuo. So Yasuo, I don't think he is as strong as he was last patch. I didn't make a video for top lane last patch, but I would have had him on my top 5 for sure. But with the recent nerfs to Warlord's Bloodlust, I don't think he is as OP as he was before. He still is definitely a really strong pick because with the Shiv and with Infinity Edge, you can get up to 100% crit with Yasuo, which is just really good. So if you know how to play Yasuo correctly, I definitely do think you can still carry really hard with him. Next up I have Tryndamere. So the same thing goes for Tryndamere that went for Yasuo. The Warlord's Bloodlust nerf definitely did hurt him, but I still think that he is a very strong pick for solo queue. He's one of the best split pushing champions in the game just due to him being a really strong duelist. He can pretty much duel like any champion in the game, maybe other than like a Jax or a Kayle. But I do think that Tryndamere is a great pick, especially for the lower elos, because he's a great split pushing champion, and usually people in lower elos don't really know how to deal with split pushing champions. So I think that he is a good pick in lower elos. He does definitely fall off a little bit once you climb up the ranks and people know how to deal with split pushing champions, but I think that overall he's a great pick right now. Next up I have Renekton. So if you're just looking for a strong lane bully, I would definitely recommend trying out Renekton. He's a really good champion, especially with the Fervor of Battle mastery. He definitely does benefit from the Warlord's Bloodlust nerf and Fervor of Battle not getting touched at all, because it just allows him to bully out a lot of the meta top laners right now. He's just got a lot of damage in the early game. He does fall off a little bit in the late game, but that doesn't really matter too much anymore because games usually end within the 30 to 35 minute point this patch. So I think that Renekton is definitely a very good pick right now. And to round out the honorable mentions for this patch, I have Aurelia. So Aurelia actually synergizes with the Rageblade item pretty well. Her E and her ultimate both have AP ratios on them, so the AP that the item gives actually does benefit her quite a bit. I would recommend picking up that item for sure on her, and her mid-game power spike is one of the best for any champion in the game because once you get Gwynsu's and Trinity Force on Aurelia, you do a ton of damage and you can duel a lot of the other champions in the game. So if you're looking for a champion who does have a great mid-game, Aurelia is definitely a very good pick. So that is all for the video, guys. If you enjoyed, then be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have not already. So thanks for watching, guys. Have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.